Hello, we're here in our Business Compact series to talk about the political setting for businesses in Latin America with Peter-Alberto Behrens, who is an expert on political setting in the region. So could you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Hi, Mario. It's a pleasure to be here and be able to contribute to this very interesting podcast, as I think. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm Peter-Alberto Behrens. I'm an independent advisor for public affairs and government relations between Germany and Latin America. And basically, my job is to help my clients navigate political uncertainty, be it in Latin America or in Germany.
We are living in challenging economic times with a simultaneous slowdown of the three leading economies, namely the United States of America, China, the European Union. So how do you see the consequences for Latin America?
Well, yes, indeed. I would even say this is a major shift, even if you could define it as a geopolitical tectonic shift in terms of realignment of geopolitical forces and geoeconomic structures. And so definitely I see things on the move, of course. And the question is a very interesting one. How does Latin America position itself within this new setting? I'm an absolute optimist in every regard. So I do believe that Latin America has much more to win than to lose. Why do I say that? Because Latin America offers a lot in terms of what the world needs in the next decades. Beginning with food. Brazil alone is a country that theoretically has the potential to feed 1 billion people. And I'm not talking about other food giants like Argentina and even the smaller countries like Paraguay or Uruguay. So this is one big potential that Latin America has. But then you have a lot of other things like everything related to energy and raw materials you need, for example, for electromobility, raw materials like lithium. It's said that more than 2/3 of the world reserves of lithium are based in the so-called lithium triangle between Chile, Argentina, and Bolivia. And we could go on with fresh water reserves and a lot of things more. So I do believe that Latin America has a lot to offer to the world. It will depend on Latinos themselves, how they take the most of it. And I'm not talking necessarily about money or income, but much more about the capability to set the next step and not just be a raw material provider as the region was mainly in the last, 400, 500 years, but go into the next level and be a provider of value-added manufacturing services and products.
Thank you for your opinion. Being an expert on politics in Latin America, so lately we have seen changes in governments over the last elections in important countries of the region. Where do you think is Latin America heading in politics?
Well, difficult question, because I would say that the main theme above all of this is political uncertainty. If uncertainty was already a kind of structural aspect you always encountered in many Latin American countries, it will be even more so in the time to come. And I would pick out two key aspects, if you like, that I think can kind of give a picture of what is happening and what is going to happen in the near future. The first one I would stress, first aspect I would stress upon is that you can't trust labels anymore. In terms of you can't just say left is left and right is right, and with regard to the political positioning of parties, administration, and so on. If you look at someone like Nayib Bukele, who is president of El Salvador, for example, you couldn't say if he was right or left. You could say that he's authoritarian, or he has become more and more authoritarian, but he never positioned himself as someone of the right or of the left, much more so as a anti-systemic candidate. If you look at the recently ousted Manuel Castillo, former president of Peru, he would define himself as a Trotskyist, which is the most leftist you can imagine. But in social aspects, he was a furious, he was absolutely against abortion. He was absolutely against homosexual marriage, for example. So two of the, let's say, classical progressive kind of issues that progressives or leftists are very eager to push forward. Then you have someone like Lacalle Pou, who was president in Uruguay, who had no problem in taking over one of the main projects of his predecessing left administration, which is the liberalization of marijuana and cannabis. Is one of the pioneers worldwide in that regard, and he's even deepening that kind of reform. So that's just picking out the most visible kind of examples. What you see is that you have less certainty, even less ideological certainty of who is left or who is right, even if you have seen elections like in Brazil, Colombia, Chile, that seem to give the left some within the region some kind of advantage. But I wouldn't be sure that this stays like that. And it's absolutely one trait that you're facing now in the region, this political uncertainty. And that is added by a very strong civil society, but that hasn't been able to really give a leap forward in terms of the democratic quality of the societies in Latin America. What I wanted to say with that? Basically, and I'm referring to a very interesting article that just was published some days ago in the Journal of Democracy of one of the most important scholars in Latin America and politics in Latin America, who is Scott Mainwaring. And he's talking about that Latin American democracies are stuck in terms of not being able, regardless of which administration is ruling the country, be it left or right, not being able to really have a leap forward in terms of democratic quality. And this is something that societies in Latin America will be struggling with in the next years to come. And they will be struggling with a civil society that is growingly skeptical, growingly rebellious in a way. I don't believe that there will be authoritarianism in terms of dictatorships or coup d'etat or something like that, but there will be a lot of political turmoil and a lot of anti-systemic candidates and populisms, so that the capability of reading politics in Latin America will be more and more important, as that makes a very important part of business performance if you're there.
So it seems that businesses have to operate in a rapidly changing, highly complex and politically risky context in Latin America. What would be your advice for companies that would like to start a business in the region?
Well, yes, definitely. This is the new normal in Latin America. It was a somewhat normal already, but the degree of political uncertainty has even grown. And I think that one thing that businesses have to understand is that politics will influence business performance, whether you like it or not. That has been, of course, a lesson, not even in Latin America, but in Germany with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, for example. There are more and more political events that will have an impact on your business, and even more so in Latin America. So I do believe that to begin with, putting or using, if you like, a political lens is very important. Reading local politics, understanding how trends are evolving, who the actor is that could on a midterm be influencing at least indirectly, your business is very important. That doesn't mean that particularly as a startup, you have to set up a huge public affairs, governmental relations, or geopolitics operations within your office or within your company. But it would help setting up a minimum infrastructure of political monitoring, for example, to have the capability of not losing the sight on what is happening in the political field. Even if you're not that close to that field, it's important to know what is happening and what your stakeholders are doing. So it's kind of training your political muscle and being able to react accordingly if something comes up. And most of the times it comes up surprisingly and from one day to the other.
Thank you very much for your insights. To close, how would you describe Latin America in 3 words?
Difficult. Three words. I hope you bear with me. I would say 3 concepts, if you like. So I would say Latin America keeps being the new world in terms of chances and opportunities it still has to offer. And I think we don't even have scratched the surface of all that Latin America has to offer. So it is still the new world. The second thing I would say, it is the far west, and not in terms of the far west movies or Western movies we saw in the 50s and 60s of the last century, but it's the far west in terms of values. Latin America is the most Western region in terms of values like democracy, rule of law, free market economy within the global South, even if all that is not perfect, far from perfect, but it still is the region that is most committed to these values. So there's a strong proximity between Europe, Northern America, and Southern America being the West. And I think that has been lost of sight in the last decades or so. And the last thing, well, it's my cradle. I mean, that's at least one of my homes, if you like, one of my 2 origins, and I'm very proud of that. So that would be the 3 things or 3 concepts that are very dear to me and with which I would at least associate Latin America.
Thank you very much, Peter-Alberto, for being with us today on this topic.
Un placer, a pleasure.